What is up, my cutouts? Cardboard Ninja here, coming at you with the Depths of the Wasteland patch to cross out. Long story short, if you've seen my most recent videos going over the test server patch notes and all that good stuff like that, this is the patch that actually releases those balance changes. They actually say that right about here. And so you probably don't need to watch the majority of this video because of the fact that all of the changes that I mentioned before made it. All of them, pretty much number for number, and so I won't waste your time with that. So what I'm going to do is very rapidly go over the new stuff that was not covered in those, and then you can just click off this video, and then I'll cover the patch notes for those who are actually interested in that or didn't catch the previous videos. Another thing, by the way, there's of course the new event, aka Money Pass, aka Skip Itty Doo Dah, because I'm not going over that garbo. So we're going to scroll past all of these changes and go to the interface. They redesigned the interface, which is, okay, neat. It basically crossout looks a little different. They have to display parts in the parameters window, and for technical reasons, which is unfortunate, the ability to switch between vehicle blueprints in the assembly history has been removed. So if you remember the assembly history, it's still there, but you can't reach it via the blueprints. I don't know why. Let's see here. Clan tags they can now consist of 5 character letters. I cannot wait to see what silly clan tags you're going to see now. 4 letters was funny enough. Let's see here. They improved player highlighting and team list, and that's yada yada yada. Miscellaneous, the challenge of winning missions with scrap also counts towards clan wars and confrontational patrol. I think that means that it's easier to complete weekly quests. But anyway, the massive armored vehicles wreckage is, this is huge, by the way. This is actually the only thing I really wanted to cover with this. The massive armored vehicle's wreckage is not added to the mass of the vehicle that drove under it. That's poor English, but what they mean to say is armored vehicles the wreckages no longer have mass. So if your character, or sorry, not character, but if your car is melee based, or if you're a shotgunner, or you're wedge based, you no longer get penalized for winning. You know how you can, get underneath someone's build and then that you stop moving because of the dumbass mechanics that exist in the game that drain your engine power? Well, for those of us who didn't know, though all of us who did experience it, I'm sure, after you blew someone up, their wreckage still had all the mass that it used to, so it basically just dragged you along the ground and you couldn't move. So you could actually get trapped under a dead body, effectively, thus screwing you over royally. So they removed that. The vehicles wrecks no longer have mass. Let's see here. Parts for the polar lights are on auto assembly. I don't know. That's whatever. But yeah, there you go. That's actually the largest thing that I think was new. They fixed a bug where projectiles from the prosecutor and executioner did not pierce the part thickness specified in the description. I tested this. Honestly, I see no difference. I tested it very dramatically, like a lot, and the executioner still doesn't shoot through tracks. So I don't know. Doesn't seem like that big of a change, but the executioner and prosecutor have always been in a weird spot, especially the executioner. They fixed a bug with the blinking environment. It's the ship graveyard. They fixed a bug where it's possible to stick environment, etc. Also, there was another thing that I think was pretty huge that for some reason I'm literally going to search for it. There we go. Surfaces covered with acid heat up and deal damage even to vehicles on hovers. No longer do we have that asymmetry where if you have hovers, you are just immune to the environment. So there are 2 acid maps right now, and now hovers can no longer just fly over those for free kills. You're safe, you can't be harmed, because if anybody else tries to come at you like on wheels or tracks, they're gonna die. Meanwhile, you're perfectly safe. No longer. Basically, if you are hovering above the acid, you are just like you're in it. They added appropriate visual effects for such surfaces, so I'm pretty sure that the acid is going to have like plumes of gas above it or something to let you know that everyone gets fucked evenly, not just people on wheels. And now acid puddles in areas above them heat the entire armored car at once. Damage dealt, and the damage is dealt to the cabin. So apparently that wasn't happening before. More severe damage will be applied to separate parts if the car is immersed in acid. So I guess that's kind of bullshit if you think about it, because the only way that you're going to get immersed in acid is if you're not on a hover, ... So they still have a little bit of superiority. All right, and that summarizes all the new stuff that I wanted to go over. So let's mosey on over to the old stuff. So if you've already heard all my other patch note stuff in the previous 2 videos. Now's your time to bounce. Thank you for joining. Thank you for stopping by. Let's go over these things. Special perks. The jockey. The maximum bonus perk is gained in 8 seconds instead of 10 seconds. The perk bonus resets after 6 seconds instead of 4 seconds, which means that you now get your perk a lot faster, and they combine this with the next patch update, which is the radius at which you start earning perk start stacking the perk is 40 meters instead of 25 meters. Huge buff to jockey, and of course the Howl upcoming, which has the exact same buff. The boom, and of course all the other spears, such as the lances. Lancelot's explosion radius has been reduced by 28%. This is because they're just too strong. You can run in, one hit a dude and leave. They've been nerfing these things since I joined the game in 2019, and that continues to be the case. The Genesis Microfactory, which gives you additional drones, now has a fusion that allows you to get more drones, because that was for some reason not part of it. The Catalina ate its nerf. It gained a 2% nerf off the bottom end, which ends up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 5% or so nerf off the top end. So, if for those who don't know, the amount of damage that you get for a fully stacked Catalina Cabin is somewhere in the neighborhood of 53% off over base. Now it's like 45% over base. So you lost like 8%, like that. Interesting stuff there. I mean, and of course, mass limit reduced. Catalina's overpowered. Everyone knows it's overpowered. It's one of the best cabins in the game, so it caught its first nerf. The Days module has been nerfed. Basically, the disabling effect is now 1.5 seconds instead of 2. Gives you half a second back. And the cooldown has been increased from 16 to 20 seconds. Basically, they did this because they had perfect fused dazes. So this is something that's just common in Crossout. Every single time they have an event that starts giving you fused parts, they then nerf those parts on the stats that are the fused parts bonus. So that always ends up happening. And the reason why they end up doing this is because, like, whoopsie, this weapon's really, really strong, or a lot stronger than it should be, once it has been fused in this specific way. So they need to stop handing out those fused versions, because they keep nerfing the base version to counteract the effects of the fused version. That's kind of effed up. There's your Lancelot nerf, there's your Howl buff, just like the jockey. AC 64 Jewel, the durability is increased by about 20 some odd durability. And it's time to auto-kind of cooldown reduced by 25%. So, has more durability, refreshes faster. The Jewel is the slower firing of the rapid-fire miniature autocannons. It's usually found in events. It's usually not found on player vehicles because the Jewel and the Therm, they're bad. But now it's a little bit less bad. Still bad. Big Ram buff. Everything made it through. That's 10 kilometers faster when in leg mode. Switching time has been improved by somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.55 seconds. So half a second faster to swap between legs and wheels, and the maximum rotation angle of wheels in wheel mode has been like 25% faster. Not faster, better, so you can take sharper turns. Step Spider. It is no longer the heaviest medium cabin. I'm sorry, it never was the heaviest. It was the heaviest epic medium cabin. And it was because it was made for spider builds. You're supposed to use it with spider legs. It was the Step Spider. They said, no, we're going to give it a perk that has to do with rockets. Okay, no one ever did that. Everyone ran it with cannons, but then they're like, okay, here's your rocket perk. And that rocket perk was 20% less damage dealt and a bunch of garbage. So they're like, whoopsie, that's too big of a nerf. So now it's 15% less damage nerf. So that means that you do 5% more damage with rockets. Great. Cabin top speed has been increased, mass has been reduced, durability has been reduced, mass limit reduced, power reduced. All of these things sound bad, but in reality, this is actually a huge buff. I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but this is a massive buff, even though it seems like a massive nerf, because the influence of mass on acceleration was reduced. What this means is the Step Spider is now exactly what it always was meant to be, a cabin for hovers. So, continue. Just looking for legs, man. It's the name. It's spider legs. It doesn't matter. It's more like the Wasp, or a Wasp now, because the cabin's actually good on hovers. Period. Continuing on, the Argus. For those of us who don't know, the Argus was a crappy module invented to counteract a bunch of stuff, and in the worst possible way. They didn't improve that at all. All they did was make it detect and shoot at things at double the distance it does now. So, just to put this in perspective, if you've got a thing, and that thing has a range, and you're like, you know what, this isn't operating exactly like I want, so we're going to buff it, and the thing you buff is its range by double, that's how bad this thing was. It's like, seriously, this is a 100% increase to the effectiveness of the Argus, and it's still going to be dog shit. I can guarantee you that. So the overall idea is the range of detection and neutralization of mines has been increased from 30 to 60 meters. This is actually an interesting thing. The Argus is a radar. It detects mines. So this can detect things like the Jiboku, this thing can detect things like the King, and it can detect things like the Capcan. And at 60 meters, it actually can detect things at a range much greater than the Doppler, which is the number 2 mine detector basically in the game. So that is not a bad thing. However, for 1 energy, not a very good thing. And it activates, it takes too long of a cooldown, it doesn't do as much damage as it needs to take on mines, so the Argus is still hit or miss. In all honesty, the fix to the Argus was to make it so it one-hits mines. Like, that's what it should do. It should just simply either A, one-hit what it's supposed to, which would be mines and nothing else because it has no effect on drones, or B, have its cooldown significantly reduced, so it can actually be used to defeat, let's say, a minefield cluster, or can be actually used to defeat something. But right now, Argus is in a stupid spot where 1 Argus is not going to be enough to do anything. Like, you've got people shooting their relic rippers across the map, and the Argus targets the rippers that get stuck in the ground. Great, except it takes forever for it to cut through them, so it'll destroy like 3 of the ripper projectiles, but the ripper has such a fast cooldown and no limit to the number of ripper blades it can leave out. This is trash. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Argus needs more buffs than that to make it worthwhile. Continuing on our 3739 adapter. This is the pulse rifle 3-round burst, seeming like a machine gun, but not, because you have to lead your shots, because actually its projectile velocity, they're increasing its durability by about 54, which is a lot. Basically, it keeps getting shot off, and they're trying to fix that. The GL55 Impulse, the precursor to the Retcher, they've improved it in every way, shape, and form. Massive, massive, massive buff. First, more hit points by someone in the neighborhood of 41 more hit points. Projectile speed increased by 25% base. So for those of us who have fused GL55 impulses for projectile speed, those grenades are going to be screaming across the battlefield. Improved accuracy in the following 3 ways. They have increased aim speed by 2 times, means that it basically gets, you know how you have weapon bloom as you look around or get bumped or any of that crap, and then your crosshairs close? They've literally doubled the speed at which your crosshairs come back. The spread after each shot reduced by 25%, so it actually maintains accuracy and doesn't flail grenades randomly down the field, and reduce the effect of the vehicle speed on firing accuracy by 38%. Long story short, GL55 is now a significantly more accurate grenade launcher, and the reason why is because the perk is reliant upon long-range hits. Sorry, that's not accurate. Long-range consecutive hits. And so that was basically a perk that never got activated, and so they're making it a little better. By the way, the perk, if I recall correctly, requires 5 long-range hits. Effectively, it's not necessarily consecutive. Basically, you gain a charge if you hit, you lose a charge if you miss. But yeah, the idea is that if you manage to hit 5 in a row, your next grenade, your 6th grenade, does 50% more damage. It is a garbage perk. Continuing on, the Thresher, damage increased by 8%. Those who don't know, this is the single shot-ish semi-auto grenade launcher. This is the fully auto grenade launcher, and it's also sucked. So, 8% more damage. There you go. Tusk, it still has the exact same perk, stacking up to 100%, I'm sorry, stacking up to 300% bonus melee damage. However, instead of getting to that 300% 1 stack at a time, 1 stack of 100 at a time, you now need 5 stacks of 60 at a time. This is a nerf because of the fact that the Tusk is very dominant, literally at the 5,000 to 6,000 power score range. They've already mentioned that here. But yeah, long story short, you can just make Tusk boosters and you can just blow people up. It's like infinite lances at that power score, so they're nerfing it, which is bad because the Tusk isn't that overpowered. But it is what it is. They're trying to make it less dominant in this power score bracket. You can still reach your 300% bonus damage, though, as long as you know you're rocking your Cheetah and your Bigfoot tires. So there's always that. Oh, yeah, by the way, I mentioned this before. I'll mention it again. If you plan on using the Tusk, Hertz, use Hertz CoDriver. There's your tip of the day. Cardboard Ninja tip of the day. The Skinner, they nerfed it twice. Originally, they were just saying, whoa, wait a minute. While it's active reloading, if you have other Skinners, we're going to reduce the active time by 65%. That should balance things out. And then they tested, and they're like, no. Instead, fuck that. Also, simultaneously, regardless of the number of Skinners you have, reload time is increased by 2 seconds. It's a huge nerf. Mine Tugs apparently are too strong. ... I think that the issue is this. So it's a lot like D&D 3.5 grappling. If you're a grappler, you suck. But if you go all in on grappling, you're overly dominant. And there's no real counter to it in in 3.5 because the idea is unless you yourself are a grappler, you can't really contest other grapplers. They will their combat mode will always beat you. And that's the same here, right? Skinners are grapplers. The idea is that you come in and you hook someone, and unless they're very specifically built to resist being hooked, for example, they have the right amount of traction, they have really low mass, they have a lot, not low mass, but I mean low center of gravity and a lot of mass, you're going to be able to pull them wherever you want to go. And they're fucked. If they're playing a hover, it doesn't matter their mass, they're fucked. If you're playing a booster, Yangwang, you're fucked. You're just fucked. They're going to drag you over all their weapons and they're just going to blow you up over the mines, right? So there's no counter to this unless you're specifically built as a counter to that playstyle. And so they're nerfing that playstyle outright. Tracks, every last one of them, tonnage increase, because apparently, and this is true, it's almost impossible to get high durability with tracks, which you'd think would be the opposite, but no, it's true because of the fact that you need so many fucking tracks. So they're increasing the tonnage granted by every track, so you need less tracks. This will change nothing. Track gameplay is trash. It will always be trash. This will continue to be trash, unfortunately. With the exception of small tracks, of course. Small tracks, they're pretty good, because they give you 90 kph. Reinforced tracks, you're Sleipnir, but everything after that, not really. Legendary parts, M32 Vindicator. For those of us who do not remember, the Vindicator is a machine gun with 2 barrels whose trait is that it fires from both barrels simultaneously, sending out a wall of fire. I've been corrected multiple times by a whole bunch of people responding to the last time I said this, where I said it was the only weapon that fired from both barrels simultaneously because of the fact they did release the Thyrus, and when the Thyrus does have its stacks, it fires all 4 of its barrels simultaneously. That is the perk of the Thyrus, so fine. The Vindicator is one of two multi-barreled weapons in Crossout that fires all barrels simultaneously. So, the buff, more durability, and a lot of it, like tons of it. Protection with perk is increased by 40 or 50%. It's not really protection, it just means that this thing has effectively 50% more hit points, and it also has 293 hit points, which is effectively 300. So you're looking at additional close to 150 on top of the 293. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 440. So now a Vindicator has about 440 hit points. And they said that it was too unsurvivable, and the reason why is because of the fact that there's no really good Vindicator build that you can use in conjunction with an Omori. Every other machine gun type, usually you cluster them and you mount them sideways on an Omori or some shit, and that way all of your guns really actually have 50% damage reduction already. So now they're giving this thing, it's not actually 50% damage reduction. Go see my resistance versus penetration video. This is damage protection, so it's not as good, but it's still good. So, buff to the Vindicators. If you have Vindicators or fused Vindicators, well, a new era of Vindicators is upon us. Huge buff to the Yokozuna cabin. Almost no one uses this cabin. It's actually not a bad cabin, but if you have it, it's actually pretty good. This buff is massive because of the fact that you no longer need to point at someone and pick one person on your team to give the drone buff to. Yeah, that was dumb. That was really, really dumb because mid-combat, you activate the perk, get to spin your camera around, hope there's an ally near you, you click on the ally and give them the drone buff. That's dumb. All of that is stupid. Instead, when you activate the perk, it automatically seeks out not 1, not 2, but 3 allies and gives them the buff. Automatically. That's huge. That is a massive buff. This allows you to, A, buff your entire team in CW. This allows you to not have to worry about helping your team. You automatically use your team. Also, it changed the Yokozuna and the cohort. If you are invisible, you will no longer launch drones to help your allies because that decloaks you. That's just something to put out there. Continue on. The Fortune. Fortune got its massive buff. The weapon rotates around its axis, and its rotation speed was increased by 125%. And there's a new fusion upgrade that says that you can get 10% more weapon rotation off of it. Expect balls all over the battlefield, hitting people in the mouth. Mouth balls, because the Fortune's coming. Is coming. So also they were mentioning that they didn't change, even though they changed the model, it shouldn't affect a single build that currently exists. So if you already have a Fortune build and you like your Fortune build, you're like, oh man, they're nerfing my Fortune. Nope, you don't have to worry about it. The Fortune build will stay exactly the same. Cool. That's actually kind of, that's the kind of change that you can believe in. Nerf to the Athena. Many people in the comments said the Athena is overpowered. They say that they can get their guns stripped in 1 or 2 bursts. The math doesn't add up to that, but I understand. I understand because it's hit scan and because it's rapid fire. I believe, if I'm correct, you can't 4 burst, even with 2 Athena as a mammoth, or even a Mastodon. But the overall idea is that the range that you could heat up people's weapons reliably was too great. And so they nerfed that. The damage on the Athena, not buffed. not buffed, not nerfed, not buffed, not changed at all. But the optimal range was reduced by 30 meters, but the only thing that matters is the maximum range was reduced by 50 meters. So now the Athena more closely matches the Destructor. The Machinist Cabin, by the way, Destructor is also crazy overpowered. It's been insanely strong since its inception. So anyone who thinks that that's a bad thing, really needs to reevaluate life. Destructors strip things really, really well, and so Athenas are more or less just the same thing as Destructors. They had a better range before, but now they're just range is about the same. So the Machinist Cabin, they keep buffing this thing. The tonnage of the Machinist has increased from 9,100 to 12,000. That is the active tonnage, of course. This means that you need less movement parts to actually achieve Machinist, like achieve shit with the Machinist. So here's the deal: Thomas Arn is a guy who this is literally a video made specifically for Thomas Arn. Thomas Arn, if you made it to this part in the video, go after yourself. Long story short, the Machinist is a terrible cabin. It has always been terrible. They have buffed it 3 times straight in patches recently. Actually, I'm not even joking. They improved its geometry. They made it so you can mount stuff to the front of it, and now the tonnage increased. I'm sorry, and the third one was the they improved the perk, because the perk was, in my opinion, bugged and terrible. So they buffed the perk so that it is always effective even if you lose current hit points. It's so stupid. The original perk, I'm sorry, I know that this is a patch note thing, but I really have to point out how terrible the Machinist design was when they designed it. The original perk of the Machinist was exactly as it is written now, with one minor exception. As you took damage, your current health decreased, so it then passed that along to the active perk. So instead of having 25%, but let's assume you had 3,000 plus hit points, you gained the full 25% damage distance, but as you took damage, your weapons all lost their bonus hit points. I didn't even know that was the case. That was such bad design that I didn't even consider that was a possibility. But no, so then they fixed that, and they're like, whoops, what we meant to say is it goes off maximum hit points, which is what should have gone off the first. Doesn't matter, Machinist is still terrible, but you get 3,000 more tonnage. Sorry, about 3,000 more tonnage. So, there you go. Actually, it's like 2,900. Whatever. Charbitus. This is the new melee weapon. It is garbage. They know it's garbage, which is the reason why they're increasing the damage area by 20%. They're like, when the perk is active, the thing expands. It's still not good. So they're increasing this by 20%. It's bad. It just is bad. I'm sorry. It just doesn't compete with the Harvester. If you're looking for a legendary melee, truly, honestly, if you're looking for a legendary melee to actually engage in melee, the correct answer is the Harvester. The Charbitus is just awkwardly shaped. Its damage is middling. It's difficult. It's just difficult. I mean, again, every single video I've ever seen of someone using the Charbitus, it looks bad because they're like, oh, I'm going to drive around my garage, and they just bumbly fuck around do their own cars. I'm like, I could do better than that, I said myself. And then I made a vehicle, drove around, and realized that, no, this weapon is shit. So, the Chronos, the new cabin. So just so we're clear, the Chronos is better on release than the Master Cabin was on release. I just want to get that out there because it's true. The Chronos actually isn't bad. At 105 kilometers an hour base top speed, I do want to make a call out right now that they should reintroduce 105 kilometer an hour top speed to the cockpit as well as the Aggressor, because they used to be 105s as well, and they were nerfed down to 100 when everything lost 5 kilometers an hour. And I don't believe that they should bring in the Chronos at 105 without returning those other two to 105. But regardless of that, I want to get off my soapbox and explain that the buffed the Chronos. Taking damage does not affect the part restoration rate. So before this patch, if you had the Chronos, which everyone who has the battle has did, if you took any damage whatsoever, it effectively turned your perk off. It meant that you were no longer repairing. I know you're saying, but didn't it just reduce it? Yeah, it reduced it by 4 times. You're healing for 1/4 what it should have. It heals for about 30% from full charge, meaning it takes about 5 seconds for 30%, give or take, which meant that it took 20 seconds for 30%, which is effectively 0 durability returned while you're under fire. So they're saying, okay, screw it, we're just going to remove that part, and it's just basically like the Master Cabin. You can heal while taking damage. Chronos is actually not a bad cabin, and this is actually a pretty dang good buff. Nerfing the No Thung. 7% less damage, and the perk no longer gives you 100 damage on 5 shots. It's 80% damage on 5 shots. And the reason is because the No Thung claps butt cheeks. It is great. It's just great. It's just a great machine gun. It easily competes with and probably was superior to the Arbiter. But then again, that's also because right when the No Thung was released, they nerfed the Arbiter by 5%. The Arbiter and the Equalizer took a 5% damage nerf to ensure that the No Thung and the whatever the hell, the Gungnir came in looking pretty, and they're like, oh, look at this, these new guns, you can't use your old guns, these new guns are much better. But now the Battle Pass has been out for a while, and everyone has them, and everyone's paid their money, and they notice that the return on investment has reduced. They're like, yeah, we're going to put that in lockstep with the Arbiter. The Omori, everyone knows it, everybody wants it, everybody loves it, and everyone's like, this is the best thing ever, nerfed. So they're increasing the charge volume, its little damage shield, from 300 to 400, which sounds like a buff, but what they're saying is that the Omori can no longer recharge unless it is fully depleted, meaning that it has to take all of its damage, and then it will then recharge, which means that now forces a vulnerability point on weapons. Originally, what everyone was doing was you'd peek. You just pop out, shoot, pop back, pop out, shoot, pop back. And if they hit your guns, they hit your guns. It was protected by the Omori shield. You'd hide long enough for the shield to regenerate, and basically you just doubled the durability of anything attached to the Omori, period. They realized that's not exactly what they want, and so they're making it so you got to break the shield. Also, a little bit more power score. This is actually a pretty big nerf because it means that you can, like, it definitely hurts peaking gameplay. They're saying that you have to be, like, they're adding more skill, you get more attention, blah, blah, blah. It's bullshit. Let's be completely honest. You were paying attention in the first place. It required a lot of skill in the first place, right? You were already paying attention to shield breaking. Now, the skill is you have to allow someone to crack your shield in order to get more damage reduction. I did the math, and if I recall correctly, darn it, I had this written down. There is a break point. I think it's 400 hit points, by the way. I'm not even joking, which is the amount of shields here. No, I'm sorry. 800 hit points. A weapon will have more durability on the Averter than the Omori now. If the base durability of the weapon is... Darn it, there's a percentage here. I really need... I don't want to do the math on the fly. There is a breakpoint. You guys need to do the math on your own. I'm sorry. It does exist, but assume that you only get one charge out of the Omori, which is 400 points. The amount of durability that is effectively 800. So for every weapon in the game that the durability is less than 400, the Omori is better. 400 or less, Omori is better. The Omori gets outperformed when the durability is somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 600. So if you have a 600 durability or more weapon, the Averter has guaranteed 30% effective health of the object, which actually will outperform the Omomori's 50% damage reduction at that point. Anyway, long story short, this actually gives the Averter a chance, but under most circumstances, Omori is still better. And yes, the Averter is still better. Scorpion buffed outright. All the nerfs that they put to the Scorpion because they were like, oh man, we got to nerf the Scorpion because it's too good on hovers. And once again, they learned the exact same lesson that they have learned every single time they have nerfed the Scorpion. They've nerfed the Scorpion multiple times, and every single time they're like, this'll fix it. And then they're like, oh wait, no, that thing that we fucking remembered, damn it. And that is, if you nerf the Scorpion for hovers, you end up nerfing it for wheels and legs and every other movement part. And while hovers can overcome the nerf, the other movement parts can't. They just simply can't. So they're reverting the nerf because of the fact that this weapon rotation nerf and this aiming speed nerf really sucked for cars. Because cars are the ones that can't change the direction of their vehicle at will. It's like, oh, we're nerfing the weapon rotation speed. Well, who gives a shit? If you're on hovers, your weapon rotation is limited by the speed that you can rotate your vehicle, and everyone's rocking Icky 7s fused for acceleration, so this is irrelevant. I mean, you could you don't even need a weapon rotation. Like, there are plenty of hovers that use dual tsunamis and shit like that, so you don't even need weapon rotation. And so they're like, whoops. And so your spread rate increase and your aiming speed, all of those things got buffed on the Scorpion because of the fact that it hurt cars more than it hurt hovers. And this change, well, it is a buff to hovers, isn't that big of a buff to hovers because, let's face it, never really came into play in the first place. R9 Helicon. By the way, this is a great gun. This is, to be honest, is a great relic. This is even better now. They just made it have more durability, and they made it so that the perk of it, which is activates after 0.75 seconds of flight. It used to do it in 1 second of bonus damage. I think it's like double damage or something like that. Now activates a little bit sooner. That way you actually have a chance of activating this perk. Right now, the Helicon's, sorry, not right now, but before this patch, the Helicon's perk actually was very difficult to activate because they have to be very far away. The projectile velocity of the Helicon is pretty high. So because it has such a fast projectile velocity, flying for 1 second, that's not easy. Flying for 1 second before impact, not easy. So they buffed it. All boosters' acceleration efficiency is increased by 15%. This is because of the fact that boosters, especially the low-end boosters, don't really have that much pushing power. So they can push you faster. Great. The booster fuel supply is increased with ammo packs and so on and so forth. If I recall correctly, yep, they reduced the amount of fuel that each of these give, though, by a certain amount, which in this case is 10 off this 10 off of the Aviator. Some of them are 15 off of the Blast Off and 20 off of the Hermit. So you have less fuel base, but you can put ammo crates on your vehicle now to give yourself more fuel for your boosters. This is a shadow nerf to the cockpit, and as someone mentioned in my comments, yes, I do read the comments, apparently you could also have gotten fuel from Adelant. But those are those are only the two ways in the entire game that could increase booster fuel. So now it's as common as shoving ammunition on your build, so it kind of nerfs those a little bit. Co-drivers, Billy. This is actually a pretty big buff to Billy. You guys have seen my co-driver tier list. This actually is a buff to Billy. 1, change weapon rotation rate bonus from weapon rotation rate bonus to 10% weapon durability. This is good for all weapons. That's just a general buff. It's general, it's good, nothing bad about that. It functions, especially with the other perk. And the self-destruct damage bonus, which I mentioned at 5% is 0. It's basically the equivalent of not having a perk at all, has been increased to 30%. That's actually that's a sizable buff. Oftentimes, you're not going to self-destruct. You shouldn't often be thinking about self-destructing because it means that you're losing the fight or you're degunned or whatever. Especially considering that his perk now is 10% weapon durability. It should push off being degunned a little longer. But that's actually a sizable buff to explosive damage. That is not something that you can just outright ignore. That's actually not bad. So that's decent. Yuki, the passive skill isolated systems, now reduces the strength of sling effects by 40%. So 20%. So what that means is things like the Spark Harvester, Jiboku Mines, blah, blah, blah. 20% basically did nothing. For those of you who were like playing the game, you probably didn't even notice if you had Yuki that it was even doing anything. Now it will actually do a little bit more. It will actually be slightly more effective. I mean, it's doubled what it was at 40%. That actually might be enough that you can like if someone clips your vehicle as you're zooming by, that it doesn't stop you dead. So that's not bad. Phobos, my favorite co-driver, the signal jammer skill now reduces the invisibility detection range by 20% instead of 10%, which is huge because of the fact that this stacks with the fusion for your chameleons that reduces invisibility detection rate. So now you can get like 30% like total if you have a fused chameleon. That's actually pretty good. And as I mentioned, the interface and all those other things before, that means that I am now done with this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Yeah, I hope that I was helpful to you guys in some way, shape, or form. Also, there's the new event and all this other stuff like that, but I'm not going to go over this. Pack is trash. Not going to go over pack crap with you guys. So, hope you guys enjoy. Hope to see you in the Wasteland. Peace.